Shelf. I'm your host, Yvonne Wolf. Today, our special guest is Adjunct Professor with Loyola University and Glenview author, Mandy Yom. Mandy, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us who or what experience motivated you to write Nami's for New Friend?
Well, a couple different experiences. Obviously, the story is about my immigrant story. So it was my immigration journey that was the experience that prompted me to write the story. In addition to that, I was a kindergarten teacher for English language learners and bilingual students for 25 years in Skokie. And so my students also had similar stories. And so I wanted a story that reflected their journey as well.
Oh, yes, this is such a wonderful, lovely, sweet story, and just something that we all need and we can remember in our childhood. As we talked right before the program, I also came to America when I was 8, so this story definitely resonates with me.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what a wonderful thing you have that test subject, right? With
yes,
with
for sure, for sure.
Yes. And what is the incubation period for this book?
So there's the long story and the short story, and I'll tell you the short. I've been working on this story for a while because I knew I always wanted to write a story about my immigration, but I attended a writer's workshop in 2019. You know, the Highlights magazine you used to get when you were little? So the Highlights people have land in Pennsylvania. It's very remote. There's no like TV or anything. They're just little like camping cabins, and I went there in 2019 to attend a writer's workshop that's facilitated by 3 different children's authors that are like very well known, and it was a 3-day conference or workshop, and they take you from the beginning to the end of how to produce a children's book. And you also have some time to work on your manual one-on-one with them and get feedback. So I did that in 2019, and then COVID hit in 2020. So I was like, well, I'm home, I might as well get this going. So I worked on my book in 2020, and then it got published in 2021.
Wow, so just perfect timing. Well,
yeah, in that sense, yes.
Yeah,
yes, and in addition to that, perfect timing in terms of like the, year or like all those things that happen. The market for diverse children's book wasn't there like 20 years ago when I wanted to do it. And so there weren't a lot of publishers doing that. So it also was a perfect timing in the sense of an opportunity for other publishers that are looking for diverse books.
Very interesting because we actually on this program had an increase in authors who were being interviewed because of the COVID time where lots of books were coming out. So, and so with this title, Nami's New Friend, were you looking at words or vocabulary, for that age group, or did you have other titles you were experimenting with?
Well, the original title was just going to be Nami, which is a combination of my Korean name, Namjou, and my American name, Mandy. So I just squished it together, and the title was just going to be Nami, which is the character, which is me,
Yes. So that's what, now you are probably open to sequels.
Well, I am. Yes, I know. Everyone always asks me, like, if I'm writing another book. And I am, but I think for me, this was like a passion project. It was my story. And of course, I can have other related topics, but I just really like to tell stories about people with different backgrounds that people can learn from, connect with, things like that. So I have a couple of different ideas that I'm working on.
Yes, and so then come back to that question of the audience. Who is your intended age group?
Okay.
And did you have to select vocabulary? Because many people don't know that.
Yes.
You have to really be careful with
Yes, word choice is very, very important for children's books, and there's actually like a formula that you need to follow,
Really?
So typical children's books are 32 pages. There's a word count. There's like the structure of the story that you have to follow. So traditional publishers will really stick to that. Word choice is very important. And of course, I worked with English language learners in kindergarten, and so it's like you want the story to be comprehensible but at the same time, you do want to introduce new vocabulary and new terminology. So that was something that I had to really think about, not only the specific words, but word count. But I went over, so it's a whole different story with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so even for someone who's worked 25 years with kindergarten,
of course,
you still have to tweak and
yes,
spend a copious amount of time
yes,
taking out a word and into a word.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
I see.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, for children's books, it's so specific because you're limited, you know, to the number of words and the number of pages.
Yes, but I think what words went out, for example?
You know, I can't recall specifically what words went in and out because I did like so many different edits.
Right.
So I can't remember.
30 minutes, of edits.
So many different edits.
Mandy, where have you read this book out loud?
I've had opportunities to read my book across various different ages. Specifically for like read alouds, it's targeted towards like young learners, and so I've been at daycares and early childhood centers and elementary schools. But because the themes in my book are so broad, like it's belonging, identity, inclusion, diversity, empathy, friendship, all of that, I've actually been able to do author visits at middle schools and high schools and even higher ed to talk about those kinds of themes. And sometimes when I go to the older kids, they also want to know the writing process in addition to the story itself.
So they connect so well with this experience.
Yes, so I've been able to do author visits and talk about things like that. So a wide range of ages.
That's wonderful to hear because you do touch on some deeper themes as well as just make a friend, right?
Yes.
And I think that's very like American story.
Yes. And when I visit with the younger kids, I usually take them like a two-sided popsicle stick with like a happy face and a sad face, and we talk about like characters and feelings, and I'll say like, how's Nami feeling now? They're like happy, and I'm like, how's she feeling now? Sad, and just so they can connect with the character and how it would feel.
Yeah, wonderful audience engagement.
Yeah.
This is definitely a conversation starter.
Yeah.
Nami's new friend. Well, I can imagine kindergarten. They wouldn't even know what Korea is, right? I mean, conceptually, it's very hard for children.
When I do author visits like that, I bring my map and then I do the little plane and show them how I came on a plane, things like that. So just in terms of like geographic things, of course the little kids don't understand, but I think the universal themes, it's like friendship, kindness, empathy, belonging, diversity. So when I do author visits for like a high school or like college, those are the things we talk about. Or some students are interested in writing their own books, so we just go through the process of what I went through. So I've done visits about that.
Yeah, people who want to write and they don't realize how much they have to learn of that. Yeah. And it's different, I guess, vocabulary that children might have heard, but then when you get to a reading level, like they're not reading this themselves yet.
Yes,
but you
it's
want
a read
to
aloud.
grow. Yeah, you want it to grow to that point.
Yes.
So what other, I guess that sounds like a big difficulty, but what other difficulties did you not anticipate?
Well, so the story is based on my immigrant story, and I did not know a single word of English when I came to the States, and so the character doesn't know English. So of course, it's like such a big thing that I should have caught, but it was difficult to convey the story when the character doesn't understand the language or speak the language. And so, it's like a third-person narrative, and it's more of the storytelling from like an internal mind. So that was difficult because, she couldn't just be like, oh, I don't know what you're saying, she and it's what I did and many, immigrants that go to a different country that don't know the language, they pick up on a lot of like nonverbal cues, and there's just so many things you can do that conveys like kindness, a smile, or like come sit here, like that's a part of my book, or like come here, like that opens up, just lower your anxiety and like make people feel comfortable.
Yes.
So I talk about that with
That's
the kids
so sweet.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can be a friend by doing XYZ, you know?
Right, they're very concrete things.
Yes.
And body language.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Well, when you, I love how your book shows Korean food because I remember coming to America. One of the things that I had to get over is that from our Asian culture, we are not encouraged to touch our food. And you have to we use chopsticks, and then making us like to eat with our hands. That was itself like something. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah,
Yes.
culturally, like I'm not supposed.
Yeah, like you don't grab a sandwich and just eat
it.
Yeah.
And you don't like the gooey stuff on your hands. You know, so that's great that you bring that out. Just so the other perspective.
Yeah.
Well, so what are some reader responses you have had?
Well, it's just so wonderful. The last year I taught kindergarten, since my students are beginning English language learners or like entering, they have some social language, but they need support in academic language. And so I didn't want to read my book at the beginning of the year to them, so I read it kind of towards the end. And it was the cutest thing, like right away one of my students was like, Mrs. Yom, you know English like me? And I was like, yes. And then another student was like, oh, there's grandpa and grandma, my grandma and grandpa were here, you know. So those kinds of connections that the kids make is always like, you know, just
rewarding and heartwarming.
I mean, that's like why I wrote it. But even when I do author visits, I have adults that come up to me, like you were saying, they're like, that's my story, you know, that's how I came to the States. So those are the kind of reactions that I love the most.
Mandy, so what social media work do you do? Is it yourself, or do you manage your website? Or?
Yes, I do. I am trying to be like the young kids, being on social media all the time. So actually, COVID was a big, you know, precursor to all of this, because before that, like I wasn't on Twitter, which is X now, and I connected with a lot of educators across the country just to like have camaraderie and like to support one another during COVID. And so I started on Twitter for that. I have my personal social media with Facebook and Instagram, and you know, I'm a pretty open person, so I don't have like separate things for personal and professional, so it all just goes into one pot.
Me too.
So I'm very, you know, I'm very comfortable with all of that. In terms of the website, I'm not so comfortable, but I used like pre-made templates that different website builders have, which was really helpful, and so I was able to do that. And again, you know, being a teacher, it's like full-on, all-encompassing, time-consuming, but you know, when you're forced to be at home, you have more time to work on it.
You focus.
Focus, and my son was in high school, and I was like, how do you click this link, and like, how do you connect this? So he was my tech support, so he helped me do a lot of that. But yeah, I manage all of that.
I think your book is definitely something of a conversation starter. I think that's probably the most important thing we need in the, I guess, in the area of diversity, that we start conversations and get people to connect with each other again. So what kind of advice do you have for authors who are looking to write?
I mean, I think, first of all, it's varied. So the first thing I would ask is, why they want to write a book. Like initially for me, I just wanted to have a story that I can share with my son and my students. It wasn't like for a broader audience. I think I would ask that question, and then also what they want to do with it and what outcome. You know, they're like, oh my gosh, you have this published book, like you're gonna make all this money, and like some people might want to do that for that, which is fine, you know, but then if they do, then how would they go about doing that? Because nowadays there's so many different ways to publish a book. You can self-publish, you can just upload it on Amazon, you can go through, you know, the traditional route with finding like an agent and all of that. I went through an independent publisher, so I had more flexibility. But I think those are things that people should consider, which is like the logistical part. But the secondary part is, if you want to write a story, everyone has a story, write it, you know, and that's,
Yes.
I would just say get started and write it. So that would be my secondary advice as like the heart of the situation,
Yes.
you know, heart of the process.
Most of our authors on the program have a multitude
Yes.
of reasons for writing, and definitely being a bestseller is not like the top, let's say. There's so many wonderful gratification from writing a book. So I like what you share with us as well. Mandy, what is your experience with finding an illustrator?
Okay, that was really interesting, and actually that was pretty seamless for me because when I attended the writer's workshop in 2019, my illustrator, who I ended up working with, was already there, and she was an author illustrator, and she was born in Hong Kong, but she grew up in the UK. So I really wanted to work with an illustrator that could connect to my experience, and she had her own experience growing up as, you know, an Asian, not American, Asian UKer, I think, something like that. So I met her there. So she was overseas, but once I really got this, you know, going, I connected with her, and then she was the illustrator for my book.
Oh, so that worked out.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You told us about your illustrator and how seamless and how easy it was to find her. Now, we have actually heard of other children book writers who had to overcome that cultural layer, teaching the illustrator about the culture so they can get the illustration right. How did you overcome some of that?
Well, and I specifically was looking for someone who, I think, you know, in education, we call it an insider or an outsider. An insider is a person who has gone through the experiences themselves, and an outsider is someone who speaks on that experience. So my illustrator was also Asian, and then she was she grew up in the UK, which is more like a, you know, Eastern European kind of population. I mean, I know it's more diverse now. So she was definitely an insider, so she understood exactly what it felt like to go into a school and not know the language, and how she felt, you know, uncomfortable or not sure of herself, and she knew that, like she felt that, so that was easy with that kind of understanding.
How did you get an inspiration for, let's say, holding a chopstick or?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because since I knew my illustrator and we were friends, I sent her a lot of different photographs of myself when I was growing up, and she literally took the same image and drew it and did her water painting. So there's this one scene when I'm being embraced by my grandparents outside the airport, and that's like a literal photograph that I had, and my grandfather was wearing his cabbie hat that he told me he got for 25 cents at a garage sale, and how America is so great because you can go to garage sales.
Yes, I know that. I feel is an American phenomenon too.
Yes,
and
yes.
so many, you know, of our immigrant stories have stories like that. You know, got a rug there.
Yeah.
Child's chair that they use for years and years, and just wonderful stories like that.
Yeah. So that was really special that she got to use real photographs. Even like the character, like I used to wear these like red pigtail with ribbons, you know, red ribbons.
Yes.
So that's just how we developed the character image.
So Nami is not just a, you know, autobiographical story, but the pictures themselves is yourself. Oh, that's sweet. Well, what connects you to Glenview then?
Okay. Well, I lived in Glenview for about 5 years. My son went to CHA in Northfield from kindergarten to 8th grade. And when it was time to go to high school, we lived by like Buffalo Grove, so he would have went to Buffalo Grove High School. But we really loved the community here and the connections we made. And a lot of his friends were going to either GBS or GBN, so we decided to move to Glenview so that he can go to one of those schools with the people he grew up with. And so that's the personal connection there. But my husband also has worked for a long-standing family business in Glenview, and so he's always been here, so 25 years or something. So we've been in the community for a while, or Glenview adjacent or Glenview.
Yeah, that's wonderful. He probably knows how Glenview grew in the
Yeah,
last
well,
change. And, oh my
well,
gosh.
and also like the company he works for, they're all Glenview residents. You know, they're
Yes.
like a part of like I forgot that country called like Village Green or something. You know, and the Glen, they go golfing there and stuff. So you know,
so many amenities.
Yes.
And it probably just grew more
yes.
amenities.
Oh, and I
right?
remember when they were making the Glen. You know, because it wasn't the Glen.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Wow. So, what is your message? You have a quick quote or mantra for our audience out there?
Well, I think the biggest thing is everyone has a story that they can share that people can learn from. And so if that is a desire you have that you want to share your story that people can learn from, I think you should go for it and do it. And I don't know if this is like common, but like in the world of education, we talk about mirrors, windows, and doors. Have other authors talked about that?
No, that's a great
Okay.
analogy. Okay,
So
go
yeah,
ahead.
so
Yes.
in education with books, we talk about that a lot. So, you know, a book can be a mirror where it can reflect your own journey, or it can be a window so you have like a glimpse of what other people went through, or doors that you can like learn from one another by going in and out. And so that's like the purpose of why I wanted to write it. Of course, there are people that make a connection, which is like the best for me, but you can also learn what someone else went through and then not just view it as a passive learner, but then you can have interactions and become connected more in depth. And so that's the thing that I always think about.
So this Nami's new friend could be a first step.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Mandy, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And thank you for watching. Join us next time on Off the Shelf.